Hi, welcome back to my channel. This video might be kind of long, so grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. What we're going to talk about in this video is my Goodreads goal, which I've touched on other times in different videos, my quarterly reads since we've finished the first 3 months of 2021, and what stood out to me for the month of March. I cannot quite remember if I did wrap-ups for January and February, but I think I did. And so let's just get into it. Now, I have been pondering on how I can get into this because in March I read 55 books. So for me to edit in all 55 covers for each book could be kind of a big task, and then it might make me stay here too long. So I think we're going to try to summarize it. And what I want to tell you is, why don't we start with my stats? So I'm going to grab my tablet and I will give you my stats for the first quarter. Why don't we start with that? For January, I read 39 books, and page-wise, that was 10,550 pages, and that averaged 340 pages a day for January. For February, and I'll pop up these stats when I edit the video, I will pop up the stats. For February, I read 40 books, and my page count increased to 13,010 pages, and then my page count average went up to 465 pages a day. And then as March closed out, I read 56 books with a page count of 22,293 pages, and this ratcheted me up to 719 pages a day. So basically, for all intents and purposes, maybe not by number of books, but by number of pages, I read twice as much as I read in January, and nearly twice as much as I read in February, just during the month of March. So March was definitely a great reading month for me. Now, some of the things that I did in March was I joined in some challenges like Reading Rivalry, the Literary Fight Club. I even joined in on a group read for War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. And I did another challenge, but that did not end well, and I won't give that group a bad name, but I am still excited to continue to do challenges. And going forward, I think I'm going to grab my iPad. Going forward in April, I am doing a lot of challenges. Those challenges are, my iPad is on this boom arm, so excuse me for turning my head. I'm joining in on Litwitz, Reading Rivalry, Mandy's Chill Book Group, Bookish Brawlers, A Court of Books and Readers, Literary Fight Club, and the Bucket List. So I have already been assigned teams for maybe 3 of those, and by the end of the first, which is technically tomorrow, I'm not sure when this video will upload, I will be assigned teams for all of those other ones. In addition to doing challenges, I've done a lot of blog tours for March. I've done 19, and I might even comprise a screenshot of all the books that I did in blog tours. I'm thinking this is a thinking video too, because of how many books we're trying to talk about in a rather condensed format. So that was my reading for March. Lots of books, and I want to tell you why I was able to read 56 books in March. And I'm going to go back to my book survey page. And by the way, what I'm accessing is my spreadsheet here in Google Sheets. So like I said, you'll see me looking to the right, you'll see me looking to the left, and if I need to, I'll look at my iPad, which is right here. So as of the I want to go back really quickly. As of the 27th of March, I read 42 books. And then on the 28th, the next day, I read The Bookstore on the Beach by Brenda Novak. And then I'm like looking at my series spreadsheet, which is for 2021, I may have 11 or 12 series that I want to read this year. And I thought, I looked at I have it marked as to what I already have in my possession, and I looked at my spreadsheet and I saw that I had books 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 from the James Patterson and Maxine Pietro series from the Women's Murder Club that I downloaded from Audible in 2018. So I said to myself, okay, go ahead and read or listen to those 5 books. So as I got to, so the first one was 11th Hour and the next one was 12th of Never. So as I got into the 12th book, I decided to check my library via, I think it was Overdrive. Yes, Overdrive. And I was able to download all of the remaining books in the series as well as 2 novellas. So now I had books 11 through 20 and again, plus 2 novellas. So from the 28th through yesterday, the 30th, I read, and I'm going to give you a screenshot of this, the 11th Hour, 12th of Never, Unlucky 13, 14th Deadly Sin, the 15th Affair, The Trial, 16th Seduction, The Medical Examiner, 17th Suspect, the 18th Abduction, the 19th Christmas, and 20th Victim. I read those between the 28th and 30th. For one thing, James Patterson uses very short chapters, and if you look at a Kindle or a print book of any of his, if a chapter ends like high on the page, that whole page, the rest of the page is blank, and then you have part of the next page that's blank, and then the chapter title on the next page. So even though some of these books one of the books was 480 pages, another one was 462 pages, 477 pages, 461 pages, they were fast listens on Audible, very fast. Plus the fact that I listened to books on 3-speed. But here's the catch. With my Audible books, 11 through 15, I could listen at 3-speed. But from The Trial, which was a novella, through book 20 with my library, it only goes up to 2-speed. So even at 2-speed, the books at 7 to 8 hours each were very quick reads. And that's how I read 11 through 20 in just a couple of days. So I just wanted to elaborate on that, because if you were to look at my blog posts, you'll see that I listed each book on each as I read each day. And you're going to see, for example, the 29th, I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books on the 29th. And you're going to be like, who's going to read 7 books in one day? Well, I did, because again, these audiobooks were between 7 and 8 hours, read between either 2-speed or 3-speed. So I just wanted to make that clear so that you understand that. So, what else did I read for March? February 18th, I started a book called Sacagawea by Anna Lee Waldo. And with Sacagawea, my goal was to read a couple hundred pages a day, because the book was, I think, 1,424 pages. So when I got to the 28th of February, between that night and the next morning, I read the last 300 or 400 pages of Sacagawea. So that was my first read for March. A great historical book about a woman, an Indian/Native American woman who went along with Lewis and Clark on one of their expeditions, and the story of her life. And then after I read Sacagawea, and I'm going to give you a combined screenshot here, I read all of the remaining books in the Greg Hurwitz Orphan X series. At the end of 2020, I read maybe the first 3 or 4 books, but I picked up with The Intern, Out of the Dark, Into the Fire, The List, Prodigal Son, and Prodigal Son. Now, some of those were novellas. The Intern and I believe The List were novellas, whereas Out of the Dark, Into the Fire, and Prodigal Son were full-length novels. Then I moved on to the Deanna Rayburn series, which featured Veronica Speedwell, and I read 6 books in that one. And I'm going to work with PicsArt and create a screenshot for this. And those books were A Curious Beginning, A Perilous Undertaking, A Treacherous Curse, A Murderous Relation, and An Unexpected Peril. So I read all of those. I haven't written those reviews, but believe me, everything will eventually get reviewed on my blog. I have a nearly eidetic or / photographic memory, so it doesn't matter if I read a book a week ago, a month ago, or even 2 months ago. When I'm ready to write the review, it pops right back out and I can compose the review. So that was the next series that I read, as I mentioned, the Veronica Speedwell series. Now, I want to get into Reading Rivalry. In that challenge, there are prompts and there are bonuses. And one of the prompts was to read connected books, and also the Alex and Eliza came up. I don't know if it came up on the Facebook page or in the Facebook Messenger group, but I found out that Alex and Eliza by Melissa De La Cruz was a trilogy. So I read that trilogy, and that is Alex and Eliza, Love and War, and All for One. And then that was about Alexander Hamilton, one of our nation's founding fathers, but it was written as a YA book for a younger audience. But then I went and watched the musical Hamilton. I don't know if I watched it on Netflix or whatever, but I watched Hamilton. And side note, because I really liked learning about Alexander Hamilton, I have already queued up the adult version of his biography by Ron Chernow, and I will be reading that, and it's titled simply Alexander Hamilton. It's a tome, I think 600 or 700 pages, but I will be reading that in April. I then read a couple of books by Rebecca Weatherspoon, and that they were A Cowboy to Remember and If the Boot Fits, and I haven't written the reviews on those yet, but I'll get to it. My next book, and I don't believe it's out yet, I think it comes out early April, was Her Revenge by Emma Talon. And a lot of these books I'm telling you about, I have not yet composed the reviews, but I want to tell you briefly about Her Revenge. Now, Her Revenge is the new book in the Scarlet Drew series by Emma Talon. And her previous series, the Anna Davis series, had 7 novels, which I read and loved, but that series is done, it's put to bed, and now we have a new female protagonist, and her name is Scarlet Drew. But we also have her aunt Lily, who is a big featured protagonist in this new series. That was awesome. Then, for some reason, I needed to read... for one of the challenges, and I don't think this was Reading Rivalry, I needed a book that was written in a different format, because all the groups I do challenges with have different prompts. So I found that The Princess Diaries was written as it was written in diary format. It fit that prompt, so I read that book, and that was by Meg Cabot. I loved it, actually. And I think maybe in May or June I want to finish that series. Then I read these 2 books, and I actually have a few of the books that I read in print. And the first one was Nowhere to Hide, and this is by Leslie A. Kelly. And this is a reprint, and it was previously published as Wanting You, which is, it states that down here. And then I read I'll Be Watching You, also by Leslie A. Kelly. And this was previously published as Watching You. So I read those 2. I did find the 3rd original trilogy on, I think, Hoopla or Overdrive, but I will be getting the print copy of the reprint of this when it comes out. So I probably will hold these book reviews over until I read the trilogy and do a combined series review. Then I needed a a book set in the future. So I chose Vox by Christine Dolcher. And Vox was, I can't think of a dystopian novel. And it was basically about how in the world that book was set in the future, women were only allowed to speak 100 words a day. And they all wore kind of like a bracelet that had a word counter, and it would give a warning when they were approaching 100. And if they got to 100, they would get a slight charge. And I think for every 5 words, the charge would get stronger and stronger. And if you went way over, you could be electrocuted. That was a kind of a feminist type of a book, because a primary protagonist in that book didn't take it lying down. And that was really, really a good book. I'm so glad I read it. Then I needed a book that had something to do with a natural disaster. And so I chose No Exit by Taylor Adams, because it took place, there was a blizzard and you had some people that were trapped in a rest stop. And it was a very, very I won't say scary, but very intense book, because you have a very small group of people in a rest stop area, and it was pure chaos, pure drama, pure thriller, really, really good. As a matter of fact, I have an upcoming book by Taylor Adams that I wish I could think of the name of it, but it comes out in June or July. But I'll be reading that book in about a week or so. I love Taylor Adams, and I'm so glad I read No Exit. I guess I'm going to tell you about every book I read. I didn't plan to, but that's the way it's rolling. Then I read Summertime Guest by Wendy Francis, and I just wrote that book review yesterday, so that's up on my blog, but I have not yet filmed the video, and that book I think comes out April 6th. That was really good. It was about a refurbished Boston elite hotel. The hotel was first built in 1886, and it hosted very elite guests like princes, kings, sheiks, presidents. And so it had been closed for renovation, and on the first week or weekend that it opened, the book focused on 4 guests, and one of them died. It's not a spoiler, but that's how the book started. And then the book played things as events that led up to whoever it was that died, and allowed the reader to try to guess who the victim would be. Then my next book I read was, nope, I almost jumped ahead, was The Lost Hero by Rick Riordan. And I can't remember what prompt. Oh, this was a knockout book for one of the challenges. I think it was Literary Fight Club, LFC. So I have all of Rick Riordan's books. Every time I do a video, I have a cat. It's Toby this time. My last video, it was Milo. You gonna go somewhere, Toby? Come on. Sorry. Didn't mean to show you his butt. So anyway, I have I think Rick Riordan wrote 3 series, and I read the first one last year, and so I read The Lost Hero, the first book, in his second series, and hopefully in April or May, I'll get to the other books in that series. Then I read In the Garden of Spite by Camilla Bruce, and I have not yet written this review, but I think I did actually. I think I wrote it and filmed it, I'm sorry. But this was a book that was about a woman that was named the Lost Widow of LaPorte. And it was LaPorte, Indiana, and it was a woman who came over from Norway, and she proved to be one of the world's most dangerous female serial killers. It started in the late 1800s and it went up to the early 1900s, and it showed her exploits on how she just murdered person after person after person. Very, very intriguing book, because you got into her mind. And yes, it was a fictional book, but it was based on a historical character. And if I can show you this with one hand, my next book that I read was The Maidens, and this is by Alex Michaelides. It's his sophomore book, and it was a really, really good book. I considered it to be a brilliant book, because the drama was set in a college in Cambridge, and I think in England. Forgive my ignorance on that. And it was a college, and the story was about a girl who told her aunt that someone had been killed. So her aunt goes back to the college, which I believe was her alma mater, and she is determined to prove that a professor was the killer. And this book just was absolutely amazing. It doesn't come out until June, but I just had to read it. Let's see, my next book I read was another print book, and this is a heavy one. This is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This book came out in the 1800s. I love, love, love this book. It's my absolute, absolute favorite book of all time. And every few years, I sit down and I reread it, and I reread this book. Okay, then I read The Path to Sunshine Cove by Rayanne Thayne. I'm sorry, Thayne. Forgive me for that. Lovely, lovely book. And then I read Tell No Lies by Alison Brennan. This was really, really good. And one of these days, I'm going to get through her backlist. I love her books. As a matter of fact, I have a previous book for her. Here. I have a previous book by Alison Brennan in my TBR that I haven't yet gotten to. Then, I think in February, I read Remember by Lisa Genova, which was a non-fictional book about the brain, memory, how we remember and why we forget and how we forget. And it touched on patients with Alzheimer's syndrome and how their brain starts to lose memory. So because I read that, it referred in that book to a book called Still Alice, which was a fictional book about a woman in her 30s who had early onset Alzheimer's. She was close to 40, but she was very, very young. That book was excellent, definitely a tearjerker. And then the next day I watched it, I think on Netflix or something, but I did watch the film. And because I read Still Alice, I went to Overdrive and I downloaded the other 4 books of hers that I haven't read. And I'm actually, I think I'll pop up those screenshots. I don't know if I can call those books by memory, but I do want to tell you about them. Oh, I have them right here. It's going to be Inside the O'Briens, Love Anthony, Left Neglected, and there's one more. And I am just going to have you bear with me so I can tell you what the 4th one will be. Every Note Played. So I've already got all 4 of those from my library by Lisa Genova, and I will be reading those probably the first week in April. Then I read Not My Mother by Miranda Smith. This was a very good book about a woman who may or may not have been, well, I don't want to give you a spoiler, but a woman who found out things about her past that were very, very shocking. No, I have not yet written that review yet. Actually, the next bunch of books I talk about, I have not written any of these reviews. The next book, which I really loved, was The Trouble with Picket Fences by Terry Wilson. Boy, did I love this book. It was a really cute book. A woman got pregnant. No, a woman told her boyfriend, I want to have kids. I think they were in an 11-year relationship. And he's like, no, I don't want kids. I never want kids. So they ended their relationship, and she went to like a sperm bank, and she became pregnant, and she moved to a small town, and he said something to her, you're not, because of her career, he said to her, you're not cut out for babies and picket fences. So she goes and she buys this house, and she bought the house based on the pictures and the neighborhood and things of that nature. And she loved the house, but when she got there, she found out that there was a white picket fence that was built around her house, which was a thing the town did. And she's like, wait a minute, he told me I wasn't cut out for this. So she meets somebody and asks him to pull up her fence. And that's how that love story started. I loved that book. Then I read another book for a blog tour, which was The Indebted Earl by Erica Vesh. And this was a nice historical romance. I loved it. I love Erica Vesh. This might be my 3rd or 4th book by her. Then I started a book on March 2nd, which was War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I think there was a group of maybe between 11 and 15 of us who were reading this book, and we were reading about 50 pages a day. But when I got to the 23rd, which I could have read it another week until the 30th, I decided to finish it. So on the 23rd, I read the last 300 or so pages. I loved War and Peace, and now I want to read Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy in April. Then I read Just My Luck by Adele Parks. This book was so good. It was so good. It was about a couple who won the lottery, I think 11 or 19 million dollars. And it showed every single thing that could go wrong if you won the lottery. Great book. Loved it. Then I read Save My Daughter by Sam Vickery. Beautiful, beautiful book. I really loved it. And then I read The Bullet by Iris Johansen. Now, I'm going to get this book in print, but when it came up on NetGalley, I moved it to the top of my TBR. It won't be out for a few months yet, but I loved it. It was a great, great book. And it was the 27th book in the Eve Duncan series. I read all 26 of the previous books, as well as her other connected series, and I just loved this book. Then I read My Husband's Girlfriend by Cheryl Brown. And this book was really good because it showed how someone's past pulled into a new marriage and a new relationship, and how devastating it was for the new wife. Then I read two books that were about bookstores. One was The Last Bookshop in London, which was about a bookshop in London right as World War II was breaking out, and what happened with a young girl who was working in the bookshop. Lovely, lovely book. I cannot wait to write the review. And then I read a current, a book set in current time about the bookstore on the beach, and this was by Brenda Novak. And this book was really, really good because with Brenda Novak, I'm used to reading her mysteries or her thrillers. And in this particular book, it was about a woman who was visiting her mother and her aunt. And when she went to visit her mother with her two teens, she had some trauma. She was dealing with a tragic situation with the fact that her husband had been missing for something like 18 months. And so she's visiting her mother, and she starts to develop a love interest, but at the same time, she's still trying to figure out what happened to her mother. I loved this book. I love any books that are set in bookstores and talk about books. I'm there for that. Then, as I mentioned, I read books 11 through 20 of the Women's Murder Club series. And the screenshot that I will import here will just show the books that I read during March, not the previous 10 books. And then the last book that I read in March was The Therapist, and this was by B.A. Paris. Love B.A. Paris. Yes, it's only the second book I've read by her. The first one was The Dilemma, which I read about a year and a half or 2 years ago. But I want to read her other books, and The Therapist was great. I think I need to brush my cat. Oh my gosh. I hope you can't see this cat here flying around. So that was my 56 books that I read during the month of March. Now, it's going to take me quite a while to edit this video because I think I'm going to go ahead and incorporate all the book covers except for the print books that I showed you. So I'm just flipping through my spreadsheet to see if I left anything out, and I really don't think I did. I think I've brought everything up to par. I mentioned that I did 19 blog tours in March. I did really good with my videos. I uploaded 30 videos in March, and I'm so proud of myself because you guys probably don't know this, but I have a lot of anxiety, and getting in front of this camera is a real challenge. But I did check the YouTube studio and discovered that I did 30 videos, and this will make 31 if it gets up before the end of today. So that's it. That's my March wrap up, my quarterly reads, my Goodreads goal that I mentioned that I have set out is 500 books, if I haven't said that at the beginning. I am more than a quarter way through, and I am currently, I think, 12 or 13 books ahead of my goal at 100 and, I think 100 and, how many did I read? 100 and, my cat is bumping everything. I have read 135 books so far of the 500 that I want to read in 2021, and my last year ended at 626 books. So if I keep up this pace, I will hopefully match that, but if I don't, that's fine too. And I have a huge TBR set up already for, for April. I'll pop you that screenshot, but it's a fluid TBR because my TBRs change all the time. I've got some great books. I have maybe 20 or so blog tours in April, and I think I have read maybe 6 of those so far, so I've got to write up those reviews and film all of those, and I guess that'll be it. I can't even find my fob because of the cat, but here it is. So I'm going to end this video. I want to thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.